And then, I think in week 3 of the menstrual cycle where you're talking about, it's the time when we start to write a list of all the things that are no longer working in our life and how they show up. And not blaming anybody else, that's the trap. It's your fault if you didn't do, it's what it is about ourselves, our beliefs, our attitudes, our fears, our expectations, our attachments, all of that. Week 3 shows us, like autumn shows us, what needs to be let go of.
Welcome to the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that births us and transforms us. This is a space where women reclaim birth on their own terms, where deep ancient knowing meets primal courage. We talk birth, womanhood, breastfeeding, parenting, and the quiet power of choosing differently. Choosing of our own. Come as you are, leave more rooted. I'm Divya Kapoor, a childbirth educator, lactation counselor, trainee traditional midwife, and doula, disintegrating the politics of birth, one story at a time. What if we learned that our menstrual cycles were a tool for growth? It is something that makes us women special and powerful. I always hope that there were groups out there educating women on the spiritual aspect of our cycles, then chime in simply in being spaces that allows rant of how dreadful, limiting our periods are, how limiting it makes our life to be. Sadly, as much as it sounds like feminism, it is just an extension of the bigger patriarchal mindsets the society gave us. If we are looking at helping women see the Shakti or power in themselves, the road begins at Menarche. I've been meaning to have an episode on this topic, and I keenly follow the work of elder home birth midwife of 30 years, Jane Hardwicke. She's a grandmother, teacher, writer, and educator in the realms of Menarche, childbirth, and menopause. She offers training programs on mother and daughter preparation for menstruation. She offers workshops on the spiritual practice of menstruation, the sacred dimensions of pregnancy, birth, and menopause. Jane founded and directs the School of Shamanic Womancraft, an international women's mystery school, and she has created the first holistic menstrual cycle charting app, Spinning Wheels. Let's learn from her all about sacred menstruation and clear the air as we speak about some common misconceptions around our cycles and womanhood.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your wisdom about all things menarche and womanhood and childbearing. And there's so many things about it that we hardly hear in the general rhetoric about birth, about everything is so medicalized. But then you're there shining light on the deeper aspects of all of this. So thank you so much for coming on board.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Divya. It's an honor to be here and speak with you and share the wisdom I've gained with everybody who's prepared to listen.
Right. Yeah. So menarche, especially in India, if I speak about, we do have certain parts of our country where when a woman gets her periods, it's celebrated in the family. Then there are other sections of the society where women are rarely spoken to about what happens. How the body changes, probably that is spoken to, but how does your mind change along the side? Nobody speaks to women about it. And it's sort of seen as a weakness. And we do have a lot of uplifting women groups that talk about pain with menarche and pain with periods and hassle, something that stops us from going to work, something that's really not welcomed. So there's a negative connotation to it. How do you see it?
Well, firstly, I did some research into your country's traditions around menarche, and they're very rich. And I hope that you're going to be one of those women who are reminding everybody that was a wonderful idea, because it's so important, Menarche is a rite of passage. So that's the first thing that we need to talk about, is that it's actually a rite of passage. And what that means is that whatever happens at the rite of passage, in this case menarche, whatever happens, whatever doesn't happen, who's there, what they say, what they don't say, what gets left out, what gets added in, and whatever's going on in the girl, the young woman's environment, her world, all adds up to teach her on a subliminal level, which means she doesn't even realize she's being taught. She's being enculturated, which is sadly just a nice way of saying brainwashed, into how her culture values the next role she's going into. So at Menarche, that's womanhood. So we get the message through our experience, whatever it is, how we will be valued as a woman, and therefore how we have to behave to be accepted by the culture in that role. And the thing is that if we do not have an honored, celebrated, acknowledged menarche, therefore rite of passage, whatever happens is the rite of passage. And that teaches you, again, how woman is valued or not. So you don't get out of having a rite of passage. Whatever happens is the rite of passage. And so rites of passage, so let's focus on menarche, but the same thing happens at childbirth and at menopause and, ultimately at death. So our rites of passage create culture. So they create culture on the inside, so inside the girl's head, the mindset, the beliefs and the attitudes and fears that the experience creates, the pressure, how I have to behave to be accepted. And it creates culture on the outside because most people have the same experience, so have the same mindset. So, our rites of passage, so how menarche is celebrated in the main, like in the majority in your country and everywhere, is creating the culture and also the future because of that culture. So this all sounds so terrible, but it actually gives us a big clue because we can hack the culture, change the culture, and change the future by having positive rites of passage for girls at menarche. It doesn't have to be a huge party and fanfare, although many of the historic traditions in your land are amazing. And I can, wow, it can simply be it just has to not be ignored. It needs to be honored and celebrated. But more than anything, what the young girl needs is an education about what the menstrual cycle is, what's going to change or is changing in her body, and how to be with her cycle, not just the anatomy and physiology, but also the transformational opportunities that the menstrual cycle gives us. Because there's actually more personal development and spiritual growth that anybody could ever want for in the menstrual cycle. So the other important thing to know is that one rite of passage leads to the next. So she who was initiated into womanhood at menarche is the woman that shows up to give birth, completely enculturated into how she's supposed to behave as a woman to be accepted by the culture. And look, all we need to do is look at the menstrual cycle pathology statistics and the birth statistics to see how that's going and see what our culture is teaching women. To my mind, menstruation is training for childbirth. It's like how you learn how your body talks to you. It's how you become cycle literate, how you develop cycle intelligence, how you develop body literacy. It's not just this annoying thing you have to get rid of. It's like a transformational opportunity every cycle. We can be reborn every cycle, letting go of all that no longer serves us and calling in the new ways of being that we want to do. Now, so preparation for birth needs to happen at menarche, because actually what happens if we don't do that, and sadly what happens anyway, is mostly girls are initiated into menstrual shame rather than womanhood.
Sure.
And we know a lot about menstrual shame. It's called the cycles of shame. Menstrual shame leads to body shame. Body shame leads to low self-esteem. Low self-esteem leads to all manner of wounded behaviors, including body dysmorphia, including eating disorders, including self-harm and risky and dangerous sexual decision-making. So we're encouraged right from the start to reject our menstrual cycle, and see it, like you were saying, that there are women who are saying it's inconvenient, it's painful, it's like, why bother? Like, we must bother. It's a part of our life that is necessary. Now, how we have for those of us who are way past our menarche, what's happened, we can take our attention to and heal. So there's lots of things that we can do retrospectively and also in preparation for childbirth. So our previous rites of passage are not curses. They're things to either learn from and change patterns and beliefs or whatever we need to do. Because the good thing is that whenever we come to a rite of passage, so not so much for menarche, because mothers usually initiate their daughters into menarche how they were, unless it's the shameful thing to do now. Or so they initiate their daughters into womanhood the way they were, unless they've woken up and thought, I can do better than that for my daughter and I want to. So the good part about the effect of menarche on those women who are going to have babies soon is that whenever you come to a rite of passage, you do come to a fork in the road. And one way is the usual way, the same old way, the way it always happens to me or in my family. And the other fork in the road is the healed way, which would be different from the wounded way. But to even know there's a healed path, you have to realize you're on the wounded path and then do the inner work that bridges the two, that sets you off in the healed direction. Now, that doesn't mean all of a sudden everything goes your way. It means you start to realize the decisions or choices you made that kept leading to the same outcomes. So all is not lost if you are approaching childbirth or menopause, for that matter, because we can heal our previous rites of passage. So, I think what needs to happen is that we all are aware of what's actually going on a personal and cultural perspective, so that we can do things that will begin to create a positive menstrual cycle culture. So, currently in the patriarchy, it's seen as taboo, and that's tragic and also a clue. Anything to do with women or the feminine that's put down, turned invisible, feared, made a joke of, is a clue that it holds great power. Think menstrual blood, childbirth, menopause. These are the portals of our power. And sadly, in the patriarchy, all of these places have been pathologized, medicalized, weaponized against us, and monetized. So we need to just bring our awareness to that and then work together to reclaim our rites of passage and reconnect to feminine knowledge, wisdom, and power.
Yeah. So, in all this, when you speak about the spiritual aspects of menarche, but our relationship with blood, our understanding of how our brain changes, because that's where nobody speaks to young girls that what are you feeling when it's the luteal phase, when you're about to embark on your bleeding cycle. So they are, for example, you were speaking about patriarchy weaponized us and they started calling us hysterical, and that's how hysterectomy came to be about. Sadly, there's so much connection there, and that's how women are seen. And sometimes, and in fact for myself, when I was growing up, that's how I saw myself, that probably all my reaction to my period is not okay. Probably I need to fix myself, and everybody calling me out for behaving all of a sudden aggressively, having those anger bursts, or having like a release from my body was bad. It was only when I started the birth work I realized and learned, in fact, reading books, that, oh, that was incredible. That was an opportunity. So, how do we explain to young girls that that's an opportunity that they can look forward to?
Yes, well, great question and important focus, because the education that our girls need, and women, it's never too late. We can update our menstrual cycle knowledge, our cycle intelligence, actually, anytime. It's important at any time. But imagine if you started at your menarche with the information, then you wouldn't be going into it with, well, a lack of information, but you wouldn't be going into it with the wrong information either. Like there's something wrong with you, like it's pathology, like it's you need to get your act together so that you can behave in the way you need to behave to be accepted. So how we can educate our daughters is we first need to educate ourselves. Everybody needs to do a big catch up on what the menstrual cycle is, and not just the anatomy and physiology, as I said also, but the transformational effects and, for example, as you said, how you feel in the luteal phase. Now, just to remind everybody that the luteal phase is the second half of the menstrual cycle and is the period of time from ovulation to the day before you start your period again, the day before you bleed. And this is the descent of the cycle. So the other side is the follicular phase, which includes the bleeding part, but then it's all about estrogen and progesterone rising and taking us towards ovulation. That's the follicular phase. So then after ovulation is the descent into the inner autumn season or inner fall season and the beginning of the winter inner season. So like when I do menstrual education, what I do is remind everybody about the cycle of the earth seasons, because everybody knows what happens in spring and summer and autumn and winter. And if we use that information, because that's one of the cycles, and to know that there actually is only one cycle and everything goes through it at different speeds. And the cycle goes birth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, rebirth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, over and over and over and over, just at different speeds. For some cycles, it's literal. For some, it's metaphoric. So when I teach all this, I do, as I'm saying, is to remind us of all the other cycles and that we are cyclical beings. Women are cyclical beings, and men are too, but to a lesser degree and only really on a daily basis, and also affected by the moon. But we feel different every day when we have a menstrual cycle, and that's normal and that's wonderful, and it's something to work with rather than be trying to ignore. Because the thing about the menstrual cycle, and this is what everybody needs to know, is that it's a stress sensitive system. So it will let you know if there's things not working in your life. You know, it will show. It's like our canary in the coal mine. It's like to quote Alexandra Pope, it's the barometer of our well-being. Everything we need to change in our life, whether it's lifestyle, beliefs, relationships, the way we eat, how we sleep or don't, or all those things, everything like that will show up in the menstrual cycle. So it'll get our attention so we know it needs to change. And if we ignore our menstrual cycle, then she'll do whatever she has to do to get our attention so we don't. Now, in terms of the luteal phase, which is the more challenging phase in the menstrual cycle, and challenging for everybody else, and therefore challenging for us, like you shared, like, you know, what's wrong with you? Don't be so aggressive. Get your act together and be a nice woman again, which is what you were before you were ovulating. You know, you were like, yeah, it's all good. But come the luteal phase, which is our inner autumn or fall, it's like the time of letting go. It's when estrogen actually goes down. And interestingly, it's kind of like a prequel experience to perimenopause. How we are in that is practice for perimenopause, because that's estrogen going down. And down isn't bad, it's just down. So in that week 3 of our menstrual cycle, the first half of the luteal phase, with estrogen going down compared to where it was at its high, then we are less affected by it. Now, estrogen is known as the hormone of accommodation and self-sacrifice. So at that point in the cycle, week 3, we are really not wanting to sacrifice ourselves so much and look after everybody else just for that 1 week and the following week. It's like, just give me some space, you know, like I don't want to look after you right now. It's also known as the truth-telling time, the time when women no longer comply. But, you know, we've taken on the projection that we're crazy and it's been pathologized and all that stuff. But it's actually one of the most important parts of the cycle as a readout of your lifestyle, because in week 3 of your menstrual cycle, which is equivalent to your inner autumn, autumn is the harvest. So that means feedback. So in week 3 of your menstrual cycle, when whatever is going on, it's the result, it's the biofeedback of how well or not well, which is usually the case, you looked after yourself when you were bleeding. You know, if you don't follow the cues your menstrual cycle is giving you when you're bleeding, which is to rest, then you pay for it in week 3 of your menstrual cycle, because that's the biofeedback from not doing that or doing that. So, you know, it's really important to understand this and to therefore expect it and teach the girls that. And, you know, then everybody's aware. And obviously you've got to teach the rest of the family so that they know what's going on. But it's not like the menstrual cycle is not a terrible thing. It's a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started seeing all these things of the truth, of being clear of what I wanted, of being absolutely straightforward, not having to look for words to say what I wanted to say, not having to, beat around the bush to read. I was very clear what I wanted, what I didn't want. And that happens, even in relationships, especially with partners, we're very clear of, I don't like that. And because we've been good girls before that and never said it before, never realized ourselves, now that we say it, it's taken as, oh my God, what, like, how all of a sudden you don't like it.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? And what have I done? And why you, like, PMSing is a common word that's used. Women are PMSing. So, and in a bad note. And like you were saying, when I started realizing probably that was right, that clarity was right. And I needed to uphold that throughout the rest of the ovulation and not be the nice, like you were saying, estrogen sacrificing, nice, good girl. I could hold those boundaries and write to myself that, okay, I don't like it, and accept it and move forward from there. And
yeah. So learn from the feedback.
Yeah,
and then not forget it. And then, I think in week 3 of the menstrual cycle where you're talking about, it's the time when we start to write a list of all the things that are no longer working in our life and how they show up. And not blaming anybody else, that's the trap. It's your fault if you didn't do, like, what it is about ourselves, our beliefs, our attitudes, our fears, our expectations, our attachments, all of that. Week 3 shows us, like autumn shows us, what needs to be let go of so that new growth can happen. So we make this list of all the things we need to let go of. And then when we bleed, a week and a bit later or whenever, we let go of them with the blood. We do blood prayers. So this is what I'm big on, is the spiritual practice of menstruation, the conscious releasing the blood, returning it to the earth and letting go of all the things that no longer serve you. And then in that same process to call in what will. So you let go of all the all the negative things, the unhealed parts of yourself, and you call in the healed way of doing it. An example is that, maybe there's this kind of conflict that happens where you feel like you're talked over all the time and you feel like you have to have the last say or no one will hear you. So one thing you could let go of, if that was an example, is I let go of always needing to have the last say, and I give thanks so the healed version, I give thanks for always feeling heard. So this is the level of transformation that can happen with the menstrual cycle if we use it consciously and for transformation. And then the other really important thing is for us to realize that our menstrual cycle affects everybody who lives under the same roof as us as well. And I always say, if you don't believe that, just ask them. And then, it's actually our responsibility to take responsibility for ourselves and our cycle and all the growth opportunities and letting go opportunities that she gives us every single cycle.
Yeah, that brings me to how traditionally I've heard that women were, when they were bleeding or right before they were bleeding, when it's also said somewhere that the connection with the spirit world reduces, increases. The veil reduces, and women were sent to be in a particular space where all women who were bleeding, they were sent together so they could meditate and connect and have that reflective phase, like among themselves as women, and not affecting the rest of the household. how do you see that practice? How do you look at it?
Well, in my world, we would refer to that as the red tent, or, the practice of not so much seclusion, which I think that's where the patriarchy warped it. Like, you're dirty, you need to leave. Some practices, some religions even see women, they mustn't touch food and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's all a warped perspective of what was actually going on prior to all that, which was, as you said, women would gather when they're bleeding and do all the things they want to do, not all the things they don't want to do. And I think that nowadays that may or may not be practical, but we have to do something. Every individual woman, when she bleeds, needs to do some sort of resting and taking herself away from her busy life. Now, depending on how many small children you've got or where you live or whatever is going to be the thing that defines what level you can do that to. But even if it's just an early night to bed on your heavy bleeding day would be a wonderful thing. Somehow, some way, your beingness, your soul, your spirit, your body needs to get the message that you are paying attention to the menstrual cycle and doing what you can to rest, regenerate, recuperate. And the magic in that space, not just necessarily with the others, but in your own bleeding space, is huge. We have increased intuition. We have a deeper connection to everything, including the earth, and an ability to be with whatever is, so there's this wonderful saying, if you've got a problem in your life, bleed on it. In other words, take it into your blood time, your period time, and just let it percolate in you, and you'll come up with the answer. So it's a time that, we shouldn't ignore. We should be taking advantage of it. And that's the case. And in many workplaces now, thank the goddess, and actually in many workplaces, corporates in your country have got menstrual and menopause workplace policies. Like, the smart way to be with this for women who are working in offices and other industries and factories and whatever is to support them through their menstrual cycle, not push them, because that will damage them, that will hurt them, that will result in pathology. So to have a menstrual workplace policy where, if you're bleeding heavily and you need to rest, you don't have to pretend you're sick. It's menstrual leave. It's honoring it. For too many years, we've been pretending that half the population doesn't have a menstrual cycle or go through menopause, to our stupidity and our peril. So I think that the red tent or the menstrual bleeding seclusion practices are really what the cycle is actually demanding of us, that we pay attention, we take time away from the busyness to just be with ourselves, be with our bodies, listen to our intuition, solve all our problems and look after our body. So I think it's really important, and we've got to do it some way for some amount of time, at least when you're bleeding.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And our body gives us signals. So I would be more sleepy when I would be about to bleed, and also maybe a little more powerful. So if I was going to the gym, I would, a day before bleeding, I would feel, I can lift heavy and I feel strong. But at the same time, I'm also pretty tired after. So reading those signs helped. And of course, slowing down was not something that was taught all through. It was planning. Yeah, sadly. Yeah. So Jane, when you were speaking about the cycles of the earth, the very creator, and you were talking about the cycles of womanhood, the creator, and because we would use earth to give us food, we understood what it needed, when it needed rest, when it needed harvest. We have festivals, we celebrate the harvest season across the country. I mean, in India, we have different festivals across the country for harvest seasons. that we forgot that it was the way similar for women. Yeah.
You know, in so many cultures like your own, with that rich connection to the earth and the festivals that surround the seasons, it's so obvious. You know, because we are all as if the earth, and women are doing the same cyclical thing that the earth is doing. And that's one of the awesome things that happens when we reclaim our menstrual cycle, is we realize, oh my goodness, I'm doing what the earth does and every other woman. So the connection that happens also with the moon, which is just like, you know, it helps us find our place on earth.
Yeah. Tell us about the connection with the moon. I mean, yeah.
Okay, well, the story goes that before electricity dominated our lives, and in the Western world, that's like the late 1800s. And in your country, in some parts, it wouldn't even be doing it, right? So before electricity dominated our lives and therefore created a lot of light pollution, you know, like so much light, like, you know, you could live in the suburbs or the city or whatever, and it'd be a full moon and can't even see it, you know. So before all that, the story goes that we have a switch in our heads that monitors the light in the night sky, and therefore our production of melatonin, so that we can, you know, because that's the sleep hormone, and gets us that we make melatonin during the day, and it starts at 3 o'clock to wind us down. And, you know, people take melatonin if they've got jet lag and all of that kind of stuff. So prior to electricity, this melatonin production was organized around the amount of light in the night sky, which also, the melatonin, all the hormones affect all the hormones, right? So the estrogen and progesterone were affected by that, such that as the melatonin, the dark hormone, was changing as the light increased, it also increased estrogen and progesterone, such that we would ovulate on the full moon and bleed on the dark and new moon. Now, you know, once we remember that or learn that, then this whole concept of red tent, everybody all going together to the red tent or to the menstrual hut or whatever, that makes sense, because that's affecting everybody. Like, obviously it's not going to be everybody all the time and all that kind of thing. So the lunar cycle is a 29.5-day cycle from, say, one phase to the same phase the next cycle, and like that's a bit kind of similar to the menstrual cycle. Not that everybody has a 28 or 29-day cycle anymore, because we live completely differently, you know. Like the menstrual cycle is a stress sensitive system, and humans these days are experiencing stress to the level that probably has never happened, and chronic stress. So the menstrual cycle is affected by chronic stress and acute stress, but the chronic stress is the main effect. So now we do have electricity mostly in all the places, and we can prolong a day, you know, like the day doesn't have to end until we turn the lights off, you know, and we don't even have to have a winter. We can have heaters. We don't even have to experience summer. We can have air conditioners. Now, obviously, I'm talking about in that privileged situation where that does happen. But we have taken control of our environment such that our bodies don't behave in the way that they used to. You know, we know that. So that's the connection between So the lunar cycle is the blueprint for the menstrual cycle. It's the same cycle. That birth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, rebirth, over and over and over. It's happening in the sky. And we had a full moon last night, and she was beautiful, a super moon, because she's in her orbit around the earth. She's at the phase where she's closest to the earth. And the moon is not a minor detail in our lives on earth. The moon creates the tides, you know, low tide, high tide. Over 700 species of creatures organize their reproductive cycle around the moon, you know. So it's happening in many other species, and the moon affects our inner world, our emotions, our mood, and anything in process. So it simulates the menstrual cycle. So that's the connection. And then post menopause, or whenever we don't have a menstrual cycle, so that might be for whatever reason, but including pregnancy, breastfeeding and your menstrual cycle hasn't come back, or no menstrual cycle for whatever other reason, we don't have no cycle. We just revert to the blueprint of the menstrual cycle, which is the lunar cycle. So that's another extra thing that women who are going through menopause or are post-menopause, you haven't lost your cycle. You've just returned to the blueprint, which is the lunar cycle. So the energy of full moon is like ovulation. The energy of the dark and new is like bleeding. So the connection to the moon, like there's so many women call their period their moon cycle, or when their blood comes, their moon has come. So, women have long been associated with the moon, and that's the story behind it.
Yeah. While you were saying all this, I was thinking that then if a woman is not having periods, say, she'd still be spiritually connected. So when it's the lunar cycle, when it's the blueprint of that, she might still have the same surges of anger or change that the body tells her to make. And then the resting phase, and then the blooming phase, despite the cycle, like the physical blood releasing from the body. Is that what you meant when you said you're still connected to you have the blueprint of the lunar cycle now?
Absolutely. So for me, 10 years post-menopause, the full moon is a time of peak energy and creativity. And the dark moon is a time for a little more stillness. Now, you can ignore it or you can work with it. But, it's not a new thing to work with the moon. It's an ancient thing that we're reclaiming. And we can do dark moon and new moon prayers and full moon prayers, and in the same way that we can do similar things around the menstrual cycle, which is the spiritual practice of menstruation. So I think that it's when we see the connection between ourselves, the earth, the moon, like, so much more makes sense, and we get that sense of belonging and more kind of understanding of the cycle. Like I said earlier, everybody knows what the cycle of the seasons is, so if that's going on inside, it's like, okay, I've got it. I'm in my inner winter, like I'm closing the door.
Right. And
or I'm ovulating, let's have a party.
yes, and I don't have a problem with anything you do now.
Exactly.
I was thinking about when you were talking about the connection to the moon and the disruptive spaces, the civilized spaces we have now with respect to the light specifically, when we want to switch it on, switch it on, switch it off. How do we then go back to the moon? How do we build that connection? Like, what's happening outside? Sometimes I don't know what's the phase of the moon that's going on. Except when, my body sometimes, I feel different emotions and I'm like, is it the new moon? Is it the full moon? Why am I feeling all these heightened emotions, or where am I at?
Yeah. So, not that many 100 years ago, this would just be the way of life, right? You know what the cycle is. You have to. There's things to do around the lunar cycle. There's planting to do, gardening to do with the lunar cycle. Again, not a new thing, an ancient thing. So how can we be connected with the lunar cycle? Well, I've created an app, and it's the only holistic menstrual cycle charting app, and it's called the Spinning Wheels. I've just got it up on my phone right here, and it basically connects you to it notifies you what phase the moon is, and tells you when the full moon's coming and what to do on the full moon, and when it's the dark moon and what to do, and when it's the new moon and what to do. And it also shows you where you are in your menstrual cycle and your life cycle and all the things. And it gives you a daily reading of where you are and what to expect, and a cycle calendar that predicts your fertile periods, your energy time, your period time. And for postmenopausal women, it shows our high performance time around the full moon, and the inner time around the dark moon and all of that. So this is a wonderful tool in this digital age to be able to keep up to date with where you are in the season, where you are in your life season, where you are in your menstrual cycle and where we are in the lunar cycle. And also it gives us the notification of the second time in our cycle when we have the potential to ovulate and conceive. So this is not well known and not proven scientifically in the modern day, but it has had proof done earlier in the 1940s. So that's like so long ago. But anyway, that there is this second time in the menstrual cycle when we have the potential to ovulate, and it's called your natal lunar phase return, and it happens whenever the moon is in the same phase as it was on the day you were born. Now
Wow.
so it's an extra time you might conceive, or an extra time you've got to pay attention to if you're not wanting to. So that my app will notify you of that and be a helper in terms of organizing your life around it. So there are other ways. What I did before actually when I really connected with the moon, it was before we even had internet, right? So not even had mobile phones when this was going on for me. And I just had this thing like, I was in my early 30s. I'm now 67, so nearly 4 decades ago, and I'm like, I need to connect with the moon. What's going on? And as a midwife, there's always that connection between midwives and witches and the moon and all of that. So I made a commitment that I figured I'd be home at 6 o'clock every evening making the children's dinner and whatever. So I decided that at 6 o'clock every evening I would go outside and check out the moon. And then the moon taught me about she's not in the sky every day. It's like there's a cycle. And so what often happens for women when they do make this kind of commitment, I'm connecting with the moon, lots of things happen. So often, if they have a menstrual cycle, often they go into sync with the moon so that they ovulate on the full and bleed on the new or dark and new. And it orients us in place and time on earth. It shows the interconnectedness of everything. And that has I think for me, that made me feel like more part of the earth and therefore safer and more aware of what was going on, because the lunar cycle affects everything on the planet, every person, every creature. And remember, I said it affects your inner world, what's your emotions and your mood and anything that's in process. So to connect with something that's affecting you is actually an intelligent thing to do, a necessary thing to do, and something that our ancestors were doing without even thinking it was a good idea. It was just the way you lived on Earth. Like, I think that this menstrual cycle awareness, Earth season awareness, lunar cycle connection is basically female earthling 101. It's common sense that's not that common anymore, but it's running our lives. So if a woman feels lost, doesn't know what's going on, step 1, connect with your menstrual cycle. Step 2, connect with the moon. Step 3, understand what the cycles are in the greater cycles and see how it's all connected. Then everything starts to make sense.
Yeah, and so magical. So while you were speaking about your cycles connecting to the moon, once that happens and you see it for real, how that connection builds, I mean that connection with the magic and the witchcraft that you were speaking about, and that was my next question. We often, in midwifery and the world of birth work, call it witchcraft because that's how it was associated and all the history behind it. But you call it womancraft. Why is that? And I love that.
Yeah, like I've learned a lot in my life, as one does as they traverse the decades, and I feel like saying womancraft makes it more accessible because a lot of people have got such negative connotations with the word witch, and our culture has supported and encouraged that. Like a witch is an old woman with a crooked nose with warts all over it, or she's evil or whatever. And then there's all the witch hunts that used to happen and sadly still do in many places of the world. So using the word womancraft doesn't frighten anybody. And it's like, of course, like craft is the way or a way to be with something, or a way of understanding the effects and working with it. So womancraft just connects it to the cycles in the same way that witchcraft does. But the thing that I learned is that if you want to be understood, you have to speak the language that will be understood.
That's beautiful. And all this while you were speaking about patriarchy, about men, do you think this education is absolutely needed for men as well, for patriarchy to rise and the masculine?
Yeah, everybody needs to know this. Like, it's weird that they don't. That this is an example of a negative menstrual cycle culture. We also live in a negative birth culture and a negative menopause culture. Again, like, that's a clue and that's a pattern that we have to notice. But definitely men need to know about this. Absolutely. And in so many ways and for so many reasons. So just like fathers, let's just talk about Menarche, where we started, like fathers need to know about what's going to be happening to their little girl. And they especially need to know how they need to be with her during that transformation, because they have a massive impact on her and how she will feel about herself and what because it's a rite of passage, remember? So whatever happens, whoever says what deeply imprints her with how she's supposed to behave to be a woman. Now, so I've written a letter, Dear Dad letter. It's on my website, janehardwickecollins.com, so people could go and have a look at it. And I'm telling the dads that what they must not do and what they must do. So I'm being a bit of a bossy old grandma, but someone has to be. And what they need to be, dads need to be, and like this would go for brothers and uncles and grandfathers as well, but presumably the dad has a bigger experience of it with his daughter, but who knows. But there must be absolutely zero negativity introduced in his reaction, no belittling, no jokes, no sexualization of her, nothing like that. He needs to be like the patriarch of the family, welcoming his daughter to womanhood in an honoring and respectful way. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know, and I honor your development and welcome to that place and all of that. Because if they add any of that other stuff in it, that goes deep into her. And, like, depending on her relationship with her father, will affect her in all of the different ways that it will. But there's one thing that does change that can be, the father is obviously key to, is that the change in the relationship between the girl and her father. Like, she's not daddy's little girl anymore. So it's like, how do you be daddy's big girl? Or like how that is navigated is setting her up for how the masculine perceives her in her fertility and her womanhood. So dads have a huge role to play, and they must bring consciousness to it so they don't mess up, basically, because she will remember forever what her father said and did. And many girls think, they lose their relationship with their daddy. Daddy, I got to be a big girl now. Can I still sit on daddy's knee? There's so much to navigate there that must be navigated gently and with adult care from the dad. So that's one part of the masculine who really need to know about this. But so does everybody, siblings, so they can understand their sisters, boyfriends. So brothers and boyfriends and friends at school and all of that kind of stuff, if they didn't know anything about this, they would think and grow up, like sadly many have, to just think women are crazy. They're so unpredictable. They're loopy. They're good one day. They're terrible the next. I'm glad I'm not a woman, or what a stupid thing. Why don't they just take the pill and turn it off and blah and blah and blah, And so men need to understand this so that they also can be part of the contraception conversation. Currently contraception is a woman's issue, which it shouldn't be. It's obviously should be the couple's issue. So if boys grew up knowing about all of this, then they would know that that's a thing, or they would know that how it works, so that they know what to do. And that has to happen. That needs to change. And I mean, it is in some places and it isn't in other places. But it's a mystery that can be understood and should be understood and honored by everybody in the same way that we should be honoring the earth cycles. It's well known that how a culture treats the earth, which is pretty bad at the moment in most cultures, is also how they treat their women.
And that's sad.
Tragic.
Absolutely sad. Yeah. And the entire picture that you created when it comes to men and fathers being gentle, being there, be present, being strong, when all that change is happening, I was thinking how daughters connect with fathers. They do connect with fathers a lot more. At least in my experience, I have a girl and she has a very strong connection with her father. And in certain respects, that yes, she's 7 and she is affected by what he says. She's paying more attention to what he's saying. And there's definitely that impact that can be, if it's unconscious, unintentional, it can be a huge impact in the littlest of the things.
Massive and devastating.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that entire picture for us to see how beautiful that can be. And while you were speaking, another movie, there's a Ghibli movie, I think the years went by, I don't remember the name. And there's a girl who thinks back about her childhood all through and is growing and reflecting back on her childhood. And she starts her periods. And the slow movie, very different from the animated movies we have now. And one of her friends who's had her periods before her, while the boys were really, making fun of the girls, and there was this fun time mocking little girls, there's this friend who's had her periods and she just laughs it off. Oh, young boys. And she says, my mother says that it's a good thing. I don't have to hide my periods, or I don't have to shy away from it. It's a good thing. And the other girl, who's the main protagonist, really then looks up to her and tries to feel what she's feeling in terms of being confident about her periods and about her womanhood, and not being bothered by the young boys around who have no idea what it feels like to enter womanhood. And that was beautiful. And I love that my daughter could see that movie. And even if she didn't ask any questions as yet, but I mean, it was beautiful.
Fantastic. We need more and more of that kind of stuff to normalize it. We've got to normalize the menstrual cycle, because actually all little children have their first teaching about the menstrual cycle when they watch their mother navigate and, how she is with her cycle. Because you don't go to the toilet on your own, right? The children can follow you into the toilet. And if you've got your period and you're changing your pad or your tampon or your menstrual cup, you'd have to be doing some very clever gymnastics to hide it. So I always encourage mothers to tell the children what's happening. Normalize the menstrual cycle. Don't turn it into, oh, don't look or don't touch or whatever. It's like and children will just take in whatever they can. They don't take in the whole, whatever doesn't make sense is like whatever. But what I encourage mothers to do when they have their period is to say, oh, Mummy's got her period. Mummy's blood is here today. Excellent. That means we get to have a rest today. Let's watch an extra movie or go and pick your favorite books. We'll sit on the couch and we'll read them today because Mummy's going to rest today because she's bleeding. Just creating right from the start normalization of resting when you're bleeding. And then, because you've got this window of time when they follow you to the toilet, especially the boys, because that's their first introduction to it, and then probably won't really know about it much until, I don't know, depends how the family operates, but a science lesson at school. So if they've had something really basic happen back at home where they know that it's just what happens and you rest when you bleed, then that's the best service we can do as mothers.
That's absolutely wonderful and easy to do. It's
easy. Hard not to, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hiding is far more difficult to do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Talk it out. And the rituals you were saying, that would create a ritual for men to know of. Just like a ritual to sit together and eat, something that's deeply imbibed. And love that. Absolutely love that. And that's a takeaway I'll take from this conversation. And here on, I wanted to ask you, Jane, about the pain. When the aspect of pain with starting your periods comes in, a good connection to the pain and how do you work with that pain is not built in. Like you were saying all through that it's a rite of passage to childbirth. whatever imprint you have in Menarche goes to childbirth. How does that affect then with respect to childbirth?
Yeah, firstly, just to say pain is not normal. It's common, and we must not confuse common with normal. So pain is not normal in the menstrual cycle. It's your menstrual cycle getting your attention to do whatever your body's telling you. So I like to see the connection between the menstrual cycle and whether it's the pain or whatever with childbirth, as menstrual cycle is preparation for childbirth, and such that, the relationship you develop with your body through your menstrual cycle is going to be like the prequel to your experience of how your body talks to you. Because, if we can hear what our body's telling us to do when we're pregnant and in labor, then we're more likely to have a physiological experience than something if we ignore our body, because she'll just do whatever she has to do to get your attention, So sadly, I think a lot of the pain and the disconnection and discomfort of the menstrual cycle, which will end up impacting childbirth, is related to menstrual shame. So we're encouraged to reject our menstrual cycle. So we reject our menstrual cycle, we reject our body, what's left. And there's a woman in Australia, her name is Sharon Maloney, and she's a women's health practitioner. And she's done a PhD on how menstrual shame affects childbirth. And it's amazing. And I'll tell you what the results are. But she has a quote that I quote every time I speak, is menstrual shame is one of the organizing principles of the patriarchy to maintain the oppression of women. Tragic and true. So, menstrual shame, or even unconscious menstrual cycle, what it does is makes us, or a negative experience or attitude to the menstrual cycle, and we see it as inconvenient, messy, annoying, like purposeless, just like not wanting it. That's the worst setup for childbirth. The best setup for childbirth is to go into childbirth thinking, oh my God, my body is amazing. I perform miracles and I'm about to perform my next miracle, and to be confident in their body, to be able to trust their body and be connected and in tune with it. That's the best preparation for childbirth. So without that, childbirth's just this kind of random, like, what's going on? So the results of her PhD, how does menstrual shame affect childbirth? Menstrual shame increases intervention in childbirth because women are not confident in their bodies and they don't even know how they're not body literate. They don't know how their body talks to them. And so increased intervention and therefore increased birth trauma, which can even be PTSD, so for women who are planning to be pregnant, like long before you have a baby, it's really important to connect with your menstrual cycle so you can gain confidence in your body, see what she does and how she talks to you. And that's the best preparation for childbirth and menopause, actually.
Yeah.
So in terms of the pain, I think that if for women who have experienced period pain, it's kind of like means that the beginning of labor isn't some weird thing they've never felt before. So, sadly the pain connects to the pain, but it's also just a way of understanding what the feelings are and that they're part of what your body does. But, sadly, there are many generations of women who go on the oral contraceptive pill for their fertile years and then go off the pill to have a baby, and they're like completely disconnected and not in tune with their body.
Yeah, that's absolutely another. Yeah, I don't know how to kind of mention it, but birth control in itself is another area that has suppressed the way women could take care of themselves.
Totally.
In the ancient, natural, or there's so many ways that can be done with other than the pill that has been. And in India as well, it was publicized so strongly. And so thank you for bringing that up as well. So there's more to learn about birth pills for our listeners. if they're hearing this, and also go back to the very beginning before they start their preconception journeys. But before we end this episode, I'm really grateful for all the beautiful things you kind of connected us with, and all the wonderful pictures that were drawn along. And I would also like to comment on the app. It looks very shamanic, very very beautiful, very spiritual, it's a vibe in itself. And so before we end this episode, what would be that one advice you'll give to young women or young couples in their hectic, planning-based, analytical-based lifestyle to do as a first step to start this connection to themselves?
Well, for the girls, the women, to connect with their menstrual cycle. Simple as that. And when I say connect, I mean actually connect. Like every day to track or chart how they feel. Connect it with the lunar cycle as well, so that they can see the joint effect, and to notice what their energy feels like, what their tiredness or awakefulness, what they want to do or not do, what they want to eat or not eat, their libido, their body awareness, their relationships. And so when women start to do this and to track this in the way that is looking at all the different aspects of themselves, then they really learn about how the cycle affects them, whether they're paying attention or not, and that it changes every day. So if it was a couple together, then involving him in that process is just like giving him the information so he can understand her and he will be affected by it as well. So number one, track your menstrual cycle. And so, the Spinning Wheels app is what I've had lots of different products and books to help women track their cycle. And now in this digital age, to have it on your phone or an iPad or whatever, to track your cycle and connect in with it so that you are not a mystery to yourself, so that you understand the way your body talks to you and how you feel different on every day, and the purpose of the luteal phase, and how amazing you feel when you ovulate, and how you must take advantage of that, and where your libido peaks and where it doesn't, and also that we have a dip in our immunity at the mid part of the luteal phase, which happens in case we are pregnant, so that we don't reject the pregnancy because it's foreign material. So women with autoimmune diseases have often a flare-up mid-luteal phase, and everybody with the dip in their immunity can be more susceptible. So it's a time to take care of ourselves. And interestingly, post-menopause, when we're no longer going to get pregnant, our immunity is no longer suppressed as it is when we're fertile. So post-menopause, our immune system is functioning at its peak. So track your cycle, use my app, best thing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, how beautiful it looks and how wonderful it would feel to connect to that. And I can only imagine with doing all of this, how confident, how clear, how empowered we would be while we do the work, to empowered about ourselves, who we are. And that's how we project then onto our families as women, as mothers, as couples, as then elders as we grow down the line. And that's a beautiful space to imagine. Thank you so much, Jane, for doing this with us. I had an incredible morning recording this with you, and I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you. I should mention also, I've got a book that's called Becoming a Woman, that is for girls approaching menstruation. So tells them what's going to happen, and good for mothers and daughters to use together. And another book called Blood Rites, spelled R-I-T-E-S, as in rituals, which is about the spiritual practice of menstruation. So got lots of things to offer.
Yeah, and all of this would be linked to the show notes. So if anybody wants to explore Jane's work and her courses and wants to learn further, can find all of this in the show notes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Divya. Thank you. Thank you.
There is a field beyond fear, where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.
Starting a podcast with poor recording tools in the market? It was painful until I found Zencaster. Its high quality audio and video recording, along with the option of a backup, makes it super sturdy and a savior at times. With an easy to use dashboard and super convenient tools for advertising campaigns such as reels and videos, Zencaster is my comfort choice. Go to zencaster.com/pricing and use my code BIRTHAGNI, BIRTHAGNI, and you will get 30% off of your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. You may also explore their free hobbyist plan to begin with.